My name is Lyle Murphy, the founder of the Alternative to Med Center. Welcome to our video of the day. This video will be about the long-term effects of Effexor. The first question, does Effexor have long-term effects? Yes, and some of these include weight gain, weight loss, or eye problems such as closed-angle glaucoma. Now, when you're taking a medication like Effexor, you're having neuroadaptation that's happening. And when people try to come off these medications, having myoclonic seizures, having the protracted withdrawal, having the brain zaps, sometimes these things last up to months or years, is a good indication that there are some long-term effects happening within the brain. Next question, does Effexor damage your brain? Well, again, just as we mentioned before, the side effects people have from coming off these medications, the prolonged withdrawal effects, is a good indication that it is doing some changes to your brain. But to break that down a little bit, when you're forcing serotonin to stay out in the synapse, so like here's a receptor, actually this side being the receptors, this side being the originating nerve. When this side is like putting out serotonin, and it's hitting the receptors, the natural thing that's supposed to happen is it's reuptaken so it can be used again. It's like a game of catch. You throw the ball to me, I throw it back. You throw the ball to me, I throw it back. Well, when you force it to stay out there in this synapse, what happens is the serotonin breaks down into its metabolites and there's no actual serotonin left. Plus, these receptors, there's a way that the body, especially the nervous system, creates homeostasis. It's called neuroplasticity. So if there's too much inhibition and the excitatory impulses can't get through and actually do anything, what happens is you start getting less and less and less receptors so that you're not having as much of an inhibitory effect. So that it would be, I don't know if you'd call it damage or just neuroadaptation that may not be to your best advantage, but it definitely is altering your brain in certain ways. How long can you take Effexor XR? Well, ideally, if you needed to take a medication because there was an urgent crisis, you would immediately start looking for holistic alternatives or other psychotherapeutic tools in order to get you out of the real reasons why you got on the medication in the first place. Get your diet straight, start exercising, things like that. But even in the allopathic sense, these medications are meant for short term. Short term meaning 6 to 9 months for a first time major depressive episode, and maybe up to 2 years for those who have had recurring incidences of depressive episodes within that 2 years. But there's not a whole lot of research to support that these medications are efficacious after 2 years. In fact, when you combine their lack of efficacy with the known side effects and physical changes that can happen, it's probably not really ideal to be taking these medications long term. Next question, can Effexor cause neurological problems? In certain people, certainly it can. The incidences of these are not extremely common, but some of them can be very stiff and rigid muscles, high fever, sweating, confusion, fast or uneven heartbeats, tremors, or the feeling like you might pass out, dizziness, vertigo, those sorts of things. And some of those problems are, I guess you could call it an allergic reaction to the medication and need urgent medical attention. Next question, is Effexor a strong antidepressant? In the medication class of antidepressants, I would think Effexor is one of the strongest ones. The reason why it's stronger than most is because it is a very short-acting medication. It does not take long to be metabolized, and so you get a very potent upfront effect from it. It's kind of like the difference between, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but between cocaine and crack. So it has been sort of hypersynthesized to have a very potent front-end effect. But then it also has a very potent withdrawal associated with it as well, which means it leaves the body very fast, and those withdrawals can come on very rapidly and very suddenly, even from missing 1 day's worth of taking the medication. Next question, does Effexor make you gain weight? Effexor is not one of the type of antidepressants that is associated with weight gain. It's sort of neutral as far as like whether you gain weight or lose weight. A drug like Prozac is associated with weight gain, and a antidepressant like Wellbutrin is actually associated with weight loss. Probably if it had to go to one side of the line or the other, Effexor would probably, maybe, a person might lose a little bit of weight taking the medication. Next question, what is a good replacement for Effexor? Well, Effexor is a dual-pronged drug. So it is blocking the reuptake of serotonin and norepinephrine at the same time. So when you're coming off those medications, you need to support the serotonin pathway primarily. Because if you're deficient on serotonin, you may act on impulsive, like, I want to hurt myself or others sorts of feelings. If you're low on serotonin, you might have problems sleeping, you might have anxiety. These are much more serious type of symptoms to have from a serotonin plunge than what you're going to experience from a norepinephrine plunge. A norepinephrine plunge is going to look more like, I lack motivation, I lack creative energy, I can't focus, I can't read well, I can't study. Really primarily supporting the serotonin pathway is paramount. That's done with an amino acid precursor called tryptophan. So what we often do is we bridge in the tryptophan at the same time we're trying to reduce the antidepressant. By reducing the antidepressant in conjunction with adding the tryptophan, you eliminate, or at least you strongly reduce to almost zero, the possibility of developing serotonin syndrome. If you take an antidepressant and tryptophan at the same time for long term, there is a rather rare but certainly serious phenomenon where you could get too much serotonin and it could result in some serious problems. So what we do here is support the serotonin pathway with tryptophan, and also, probably not the same day, but maybe after you see how well the first cut or withdrawal goes, then bridging in some DLPA and or tyrosine. Now, that is the precursor for dopamine, which is the precursor for norepinephrine, which is another facet of what the drug is artificially supporting. So both prongs, tryptophan to support the serotonin, the tyrosine and the DLPA to support the norepinephrine, so that when you're coming down, you don't go in a plunge from these neurochemicals. And Effexor change your personality. Well, it depends on what you call personality, really, but like, if you drink alcohol, can it change your personality? Absolutely. Now, in some people, it can change your personality severely. You could go from a Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde in, just a matter of a few drinks. But for most people, it doesn't change you from being like a God-fearing, ethical person to suddenly being a demonstrably evil person. And it's certainly almost invariably not going to happen that you get those type of personality changes with Effexor. But can it make you more anxious, more agitated, impact your sleep, cause you to be maybe more engaged in life? Yes, and those are personality changes too. They may be more subtle, whether good or bad. You can expect you will have some mood and some personality changes associated with taking a drug like Effexor. Can Effexor cause memory issues? Well, venlafaxine has been associated with severe memory loss and cognitive side effects that could lead to dementia, especially in an older population. But it's not as likely as some other drugs. It probably is something that is much lower on the incidence scale than, let's say, an antipsychotic. Effexor, since it does have a component that is increasing norepinephrine, it might actually increase your ability to hold your attention, at least for a little while until you have the potential backbite from the medication, which what that means is the medication works for a little while, but then it exhausts the neurochemicals, and then things actually go back to the way they were, or potentially even worse. Next question, can Effexor cause liver damage? Well, there is evidence to support that Effexor can cause serious hepatic failure, but in a very limited population. By very limited, I mean like 1 in 100,000. However, in about 1% of the population, it does increase liver enzymes to the point where you have some, as they say, non-symptomatic blood changes and liver changes, and probably those would go away upon cessation of the medication. But it's not a strong like liver damaging type drug like, let's say, Depakote or something. What is a good replacement for Effexor? Well, I guess there's more to the story than this. So since Effexor is such a short-acting drug, when you stop the medication, you start noticing those withdrawal effects rather soon. In my former life, back in my 20s, I was a base jumper. And there was a saying, it's not the fall that kills you, it's the sudden stop, right? So if you were jumping onto a 50-foot thick cotton pillow, then your acceleration would be slowed down over a distance of time that wouldn't hurt you. It's the sudden stop that gets you. Well, that's how it is with this particular drug. This particular drug is very, very hard to navigate around that particular phenomenon. Unlike Prozac. Now, Prozac is completely the opposite. Prozac is basically like landing on 50 feet of cotton because the half-life of Prozac is 5 days. So over the course of 5 days, you're still getting some of that medication in your system so that it doesn't leave all at the same time. So people don't have the same withdrawal effect coming off of Prozac as they do coming off Effexor. Effexor is just like, whew, it's out of your system right away, and you could potentially go into a serotonin deficit that could be extremely hard on your life and make the withdrawal unbearable. So there is a technique to avoid that. Now, there's other techniques too, like supporting your body with tryptophan about 2 weeks prior to starting withdrawal. But it's really the serotonin plunge that gets people the most rather than the norepinephrine plunge. I mean, it doesn't feel good to come off of norepinephrine and have no aspiration or reward in life, but it eventually usually passes in most people. But that abrupt lack of serotonin, that can cause impulse control problems. It can cause a person to act on suicidal ideation, sleep problems, brain zaps, I mean, all sorts of things that really are super disconcerting in comparison. So there is a technique that we call the Prozac crossover, where a person takes half of their Effexor and takes it away and replaces it with about a half, well, an equivalent dose to that half of Prozac. So let's say they're on 225 milligrams of Effexor. They take half of that away and bring in maybe 15 to 20 milligrams of Prozac. Then, if that's well tolerated, then they stop the Effexor and go up to maybe 30 or 40 milligrams of Prozac and then taper off of Prozac after a few weeks. That's one way to go about it if you're getting stuck. But most people, they just need to taper very slow, very cautiously, like going from 225 milligrams. I mean, maybe just try taking 25 milligrams off of that and see what it feels like. See what type of withdrawal effects you're going to have when you're coming off this medication. Now, you may not feel it as much on the top end, but it's much better to go into this thing slowly and say, okay, I had increased, crying jags, my sleeping was impaired, I felt like I wanted to scream at everybody, but it was kind of tolerable, and you know what to expect as you go through further cuts. Next question, can Effexor cause psychosis? Well, it is known to certainly exacerbate the bipolar and schizoaffective population because it is increasing to some degree your available dopamine. And people that have too much dopamine already, that could push them over the edge and push them off into mania and or psychosis. So it's not the best type of drug to take if you have history of that. And that is the last of our questions on the long-term effects of Effexor. I thank you very much for tuning in with us today, and I hope you have a good day or evening. And please note that if you're watching this video and you're considering changing your medications, don't make the changes based upon what you saw in this video, but instead ask your prescriber to help you. And if you can't find a prescriber to help you that is sympathetic to you, go on to either the ACAM, which is the American College for the Advancement in Medicine, and or the IMMH.org, which you can find a practitioner on there that can work with you, hopefully in your area, and get you off this stuff more safely. And also you can contact the Alternative to Med Center if you feel like you need a residential stay where you can basically be nurtured through this process with a lot of love and compassion and experience that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. For information about Alternative to Med Center, give us a call at 888-984-9667.